Hello and welcome back to CDL Podcast episode 5. Today this one's going to be about the Chicago recap. So to start out, rather than do what we normally do and we go over kind of each match individually and then look at like the score line, 3-1, 3-2, whatever it was, we're kind of just going to touch on each team and how they played individually, and we obviously won't focus too much on the teams that were eliminated very early and didn't play that well. We'll just quick touch on them and then give more focus to the teams that played a little better, that are more of the premier teams. So obviously, as you all know, Dallas won the event and Atlanta was the runner-up. Not a huge surprise. I mean, those are two teams that you'd expect to see in the final. Maybe you'd expect to see Atlanta win, but it's no shocker that Dallas wins the event. First, we're going to look at my predictions quick and how I did. I had some pretty off predictions, I would say. I predicted FaZe and Huntsmen to come out of Group A, which they did. They didn't exactly do it in the way that I thought they would. New York beat Huntsmen in the first match, although I did say that I could see this happening. I said I could see FaZe and Huntsmen both losing their first match, and the Huntsmen did in a close one. I can't remember how deep that Game 5 went, but they lost 3-2 to the Subliners. So that one was kind of shocking to some people, but I really wasn't too shocked to see Chicago. Teams with Scump and Formal always seem to come out slow out of the gates in whatever tournament it is on a Friday. But yeah, they both ended up coming out of that group. And then in the bottom group, I predicted OGLA to come out with Dallas Empire, and I couldn't have been more wrong on that one. OGLA only won 2 maps. They got absolutely smoked out of the tournament. And Seattle surprisingly came out of that. So Seattle and Dallas came out of Group B. The Empire 3-0'd the Huntsmen in the semis, and Surge fought decently well against FaZe, but lost 3-1, and then FaZe was taken out 3-1 in the final. So my predictions were, I got 3 out of 4 of the semifinal teams right, and then I did not predict the Surge. My prediction was horrible with OGLA. They got smoked, like I said. But overall, my predictions were pretty good. I was kind of right on my subliners making a big improvement. I mean, they beat the Huntsmen, lost to FaZe in a very close match, and then lost to the Huntsmen in the knockout match, so that was pretty accurate actually. But now I want to move on to the teams from the tournament, kind of talk about, starting with kind of the teams that did worse, just quickly touch base on them, give some thoughts on them, and then move into more of the better teams and how they did. The first few teams are LA Gorillas and London. They both were eliminated fairly early on in the tournament. LA Gorillas, not much to talk about. They lost to Seattle twice, who Seattle showed some improvement this weekend, but they're viewed as one of the bottom 4 or 5 teams in the league, and they lost to Seattle twice, LA Gorillas. They did beat one team. Who did they beat? I got it pulled up right here. The LA Gorillas actually beat OGLA, who we'll talk about them in a little bit. They looked horrible, but yeah, the LA Gorillas overall, not an impressive weekend. They didn't really show much improvement. They beat OGLA, who looked horrible, so I don't know how much of an accomplishment that is, and they lost twice to Seattle and got smoked pretty bad. So there's not much to say. I think they're the worst team in the league. They didn't really improve much, and I don't see them improving much unless some crazy roster change happens. And then London actually looked pretty decent. I know they did lose 2 matches in a row to get knocked out, but they had to play Chicago and Atlanta after not playing in an event for 2 months. I mean, they got smoked by Atlanta pretty decently, 3-0, and then they lost to the Huntsmen 3-1. So they only won a map on the weekend, but to be fair to them, they played the 2 best teams in the league. Many would argue, I mean, maybe you could say Dallas is above those 2 now, but the Huntsmen are right up there in the top 3 still for sure. And going into event, they were probably top 2. So London, I think they showed improvement. I don't think this is an indictment on them as a horrible team. It maybe does show that they can't ever reach the top this year because they weren't able to take out either of the top 2 teams, but I don't think there's a lot to take away from this. They had a new roster. They had to play the 2 best teams, got double booped out of the tournament right away. Unfortunate for them, but I think we'll hear them make some noise later on in the year. The next team I want to touch on is Optic. As you know, I predicted them to do decently well in this tournament, get to the semis, and then lose, and maybe even possibly make a final if they got lucky somehow. But they were absolutely horrible. They won 2 maps. They looked dysfunctional as a team after they were all tweeting about how upset they were. The vibes seemed off. Overall, the team just, I think they're in shambles. I don't think there's any saving this team anymore after that. I think they're so in their heads about the league being online, which is an unfortunate circumstance, and it sucks that they can't play on LAN. But unless the league somehow finds a way to get back to LAN this year, before the final champs, whatever you want to call it, I don't see Optic making any more noise. I was high on them. I was keeping my hopes up for them because they have so much talent, but I think their team is just in shambles. I think the vibes are horrible. I think they have too many excuses for online. I think the players are just so in their head that they're good, they're fine. It's just online that's screwing them up. That I just think that the team's chalk. They were so disappointing. Something needs to change. They need to have a vibe change with the team, whether it's a roster change or just a heart to heart and talk and figure this thing out, because they were horrible and disappointing this week, and I was really disappointed to see them only win 2 maps. And then the team, on a completely opposite note of that, of Optic, is New York. Impressed me greatly. I know they didn't make it out of their group, but to me, they were the most impressive team this weekend. Obviously, Dallas was impressive, winning their second event, becoming the league leader in event wins. But New York impressed me way more because Dallas, we already knew they were good. We knew they could make a final in every event. We knew they could win. But New York hadn't even shown us that they could really win a series. And then they came out, they beat the Huntsmen, who, I mean, you might want to say the Huntsmen aren't as good anymore, but they still made a semifinal, and they're still a good team. And New York actually beat them in the first round. And then New York played FaZe very tough and could have easily won that series, lost it 3-2, and then they lost again to the Huntsmen. So once again, just like London, they lost to the 2 best teams, but instead of kind of getting smoked like London did, they actually were able to take out Huntsmen, go to a game 5 with FaZe, and then play a tight 4-game series with the Huntsmen. So they improved greatly. Mac Melts, I didn't know much about him. I never said he was bad or good or whatever he was going to be. I was just unsure, but he proved he's pretty good. Whether it's online, maybe the reason for that, he was pretty good. All the players in the team, Zuma stepped up, Attached looked good, Temp looked really good, Accuracy even impressed me somewhat. Their team looked really good. And when I do my power rankings later, you'll see I move them up a good bit. I'm excited to see them play for the rest of the year. I think that they improved by far the most of any team we saw this weekend. I kind of thought, like I said in the last episode, that London and New York were going to be the 2 teams that showed the most improvement, with maybe Seattle as a dark horse this weekend. I think London actually showed some improvement despite getting knocked out early, but New York showed great improvement. I'm really excited for them for the rest of the year. I think they're now like a dark horse team to constantly make semifinals or finals and maybe even sneak an event after watching this weekend. Might be a little too soon to say that, but they really impressed me since they played all the top teams essentially and played them very well. The next team is Seattle, who actually showed some life, although it might be kind of fluky life, but I think they have a chance to finish strong. They beat LA Gorillas in their first match, and then lost to the Empire 3-1, and then beat LA Gorillas 3-1. So they beat LA Gorillas 6-1 on the weekend. So this is where the fluke aspect kind of comes in. They were able to win 2 matches and make it out of their group, but both matches were against LA Gorillas, who I think we'd all agree is the worst team in the league. So I don't know how much this really says. At least they were able to win some searches. I guess it proves kind of that they've improved somewhat in that aspect, and at least they're winning matches, although I think I saw that they've won 4 matches in total on the entire year, and all 4 are against the LA Gorillas, so they're just farming pro points off them, I guess. Let's see here. Yeah, they have 40 CDL points, and I'm fairly certain that all of them are against the Gorillas. But I think overall, they improved. Their search looked a little better. They were at least competitive, and against Dallas and Atlanta, they were at least able to take a map off of each of them, which is probably more than 2 weeks ago they would have done. If they would have played either of those teams, they probably would have been swept. So I think maybe they made some improvements. I think overall the team is still, semifinals, like their max potential, unless they really go crazy. I could see them making... This team wouldn't surprise me if they made a slow improvement all year, and then by the end of the year they were top 3, just because of the players in the team. They're veterans, they're champions, world champions. They have so many championships on this roster combined, and so much earnings. It wouldn't surprise me, I guess, if come a month from now they were a top 3 team somehow and making a semifinal every tournament. But I think they're going to show a lot slower improvement than New York. I think New York will improve at a rapid pace due to the talent on the roster and the young players. And I think the Seattle team has a chance to keep improving, but I think their improvement will be slow. And this weekend could have been a fluke due to the fact that their only wins were against the LA Gorillas. Now we're getting to kind of the bread and butter teams, the best teams in the league. We got Chicago, who fell short in the semifinal again. This is kind of weird to say, but I think something's just wrong with the team. There's way too much talent on that team to not be in the final constantly. Especially, they played a team that they've owned all year in Dallas, and that they've had their number on LAN. I've heard that they've struggled in scrims online against them all year, which maybe that was in their head a little bit, but something's wrong with this team. That's what, dating back to the last LAN event, they lost to Florida in the semis, and then last online event they lost to Florida in the semis, and now they lose to Dallas in the semis, and also lose to New York, who New York, like I said, made great improvements, but Chicago should still beat them. They should still be the better team, especially coming into the tournament. New York might not have had the confidence yet after winning that match. But anyways, I think something's just wrong with this team. Clearly, they have the talent. There's no issue with talent. I see a lot of people saying drop Gunless, drop Gunless, drop Gunless, not talented enough. They need Dashy. Well, first of all, that's just dumb. I'm not a huge Gunless fan because I think he brings some pretty bad vibes to the team, but Gunless is extremely talented. There's no issue with his talent. Everybody on this team, Scump, Formal, Arcides, Envoy clearly is the best player in the team right now. They all are talented enough. I think something, like, it seems to always be on Formal and Scump teams, there's something fundamentally wrong. They're trying to play too much into the fact that they might be the most talented team rather than actually getting the fundamentals down, and then from the fundamentals as their basics, then using their talent to win games. It seems like a team like that, if they got their fundamentals down, would literally be unstoppable. Kind of like if Atlanta had their fundamentals down, they'd be unstoppable, because if they're playing the game correctly and then playing against another team that's playing the game correctly, they're going to win every time, because their talent is just going to outgun the other team unless the other team just gets a really hot game going. So I think something's fundamentally wrong with this team, whether just like OGLA, they need to sit down, have a heart-to-heart, figure out what's going on with the vibes, or maybe a roster change is due. Sometimes vibes are unfixable. I know Gunless has in the past benched himself on teams and broke himself off of teams because of bad vibes. Arcides even seems upset. I don't know if that's because Pristini's on a bench and he maybe is regretting. I think he said that before, that he's regretting not playing with Pristini anymore. So maybe that could be the case, but I think overall something just needs to change. I want to say a roster change, although I don't want to jump to that conclusion because this roster is extremely talented. We've seen them win an event. We've seen them win multiple matches in the first weekend. They're way too talented to need a roster change, but if vibes are the issue, then the roster change is in order. Then the next team, our second place team from this weekend, is Atlanta. No need to hit a panic button here. I think they're far from it. They looked great. Maybe just rust from not playing in an event in like a month or so gets to them here, their first online event. Maybe they're not used to this yet. I don't think there's any reason to panic here. I still think you can make a great case that they're the best team in the game. If they're not the best, they're number two. There's no debating that they're not in the top two. They're up there for sure. There's no reason to hit a panic button. I saw a lot of people criticizing Major Maniac after the weekend. That's just stupid. He's one of the better young players in the game. He's a great player. Everybody on this team is a great player. There's no bad players in this team. Simp and Abizi are obviously the best sub duo in the game. Major Maniac, Selim, who's ever on the AR, is one of the top ARs in the game, and Priesta is probably the best gap filler role player that's ever been in COD, maybe. There's no reason to hit the panic button on this team. I still could easily see them being the best team next week at the event. No reason to hit the panic button. Great team. They just fell a little short this weekend. It's going to happen. The great teams are going to fall short. And then lastly, the team that won it all to become the league leader in, I believe they're now the league leader in CDL points. Let me look. Yeah, they're at 150 with the Huntsmen in second. The Dallas Empire win the event. They become the league leader also in event wins with 2. I think they might be the best team in the game now. I think if this was a LAN league still, they wouldn't be the best team in the game. I think they'd be number 3 still behind the Huntsmen and Atlanta, because I think Shotzi and Illy aren't as good on LAN right now. I'm not questioning Krim, Clay, or Hook. Those are all storied veterans in COD and even in Halo for a couple of them. Those players, I know people are saying like Krim's an onliner now and stuff. That's just asinine and dumb to say. I mean, Krim has 34 championships on LAN, 36 if you count the onlines, 35. I don't know what we're doing with the onlines, but that's just dumb to say that Krim, Clay, and Hook are onliners. They're all proven great on LAN, and I think that they're the best team online now, because I think Shotzi and Illy are solid on LAN, but I don't think that they're anywhere close to like Abizi and Simp. But online, I guess Shotzi and Illy are clearly better players, as they've shown. They were solid online when they won their first event, but now, I mean, these last 2 online events, they've just been a different animal from what they were on LAN. So I think because the league is online now, Dallas has got to be the number 1 team. Not just because it's online solely, because I still think they're number 3 or maybe even number 2 if it's on LAN, if Chicago struggles continued, but we'll never know if they would have continued on LAN. But I think Dallas is kind of a clear-cut number 1 until Atlanta takes them out right now. So that kind of gives you a hint into what my power rankings are, which we're going to get into next. And I think this week we'll start from the bottom and go up. We usually start at number 1, but I think that's a little better way to do it, is start at the bottom, talk about those teams a little less, then give the other teams on the top a little more shine. We're going to go through this rather quickly because we're trying to transition these episodes maybe into a little shorter, so they're a little easier to get through quickly, get through your day. On number 12 in the power rankings, the worst team in the league, no surprise here. I think they're everybody's worst. LA Gorillas. This team is chalked. They had Aches, and Aches usually seems to find his way to somehow get like a top 2 finish each year, or top 4, and somehow find his way into winning. But they benched him, brought in a bunch of young players. It hasn't worked out so far. And unfortunately for the organization, it would have been nice for those young players to get LAN experience going into next year if they wanted to make them franchise players. But in the situation we're in, that LAN experience is non-existent now. I think this team stays at 12. I don't see a way that they jump ahead of anyone this year. And then number 11 is Toronto, another no surprise here. And I think Toronto is making improvements. I could see them possibly jumping up to 10, 9, maybe 8 at the max, but that's about their ceiling. It's weird to me that Looney's benched. I know they seem to play better without him in the lineup, but he's like the one storied veteran, maybe along with Methods if you consider him that, that's on that roster. Clearly the most decorated player is Looney on the roster, and they've had him benched for a while. So I don't know what's going on there, but I see Toronto as the 11th best team, not much room for improvement. And then number 10, my disappointing team of the year, we've got OGLA. They plummeted, I think, in my last power rankings. Let me look at them here. I think I had OGLA at 6. Yeah, I had OGLA at 6 last time, and now I plummeted them to 10 because last time I made those power rankings, that was coming out of the event where they got to the semis and then lost to Atlanta in a pretty close match, 3-1, I think. So I figured that after that they were going to keep climbing, and then everything happened. The season was canceled, put online, and I think that the team's vibes are just off. There were some weird roster rumors going on that might have affected them even more, and I think the team's in their head about being online. I think they're pretty much done for the year. I don't think they're going to rise too much more above 10. I think the bottom 3 now, OGLA, Toronto, and LA Gorillas, is set, which is crazy for me to say because OGLA is probably a top 3 talent team in the league. I think the team's just chalked, and online they're just ready to throw it in already. So unless we go back to LAN, I don't see OGLA moving too much higher than 10. On then number 9, a team that I struggled with to put, I kind of almost wanted to put them all the way up at 7, but I kept them at number 9, the Seattle Surge, because I think their 2 wins were against the LA Gorillas this weekend. So I don't necessarily know that shows a ton of improvement. They just keep beating up on the worst team. That's the only team they've beat. But they've certainly shown enough to go ahead of OGLA and Toronto now, because they've showed some improvement, a little bit better in search. They played tough series against Dallas and Atlanta, so I can see them being number 9, and maybe moving up to like the 7, 8, possibly 6 range by the end of the year. I could even see this team being top 4 somehow by the end of the year. Obviously, it'd be pretty surprising if they were top 4, but with the players in this team, I'm never going to count them out. Then number 8, I kind of flip-flopped 7 and 8 a while when I was trying to brainstorm these up, but I have London. The only reason I put London below Paris is, although London is the first time they played in a tournament in 2 months, they played the 2 best teams like we said, they lost both matches. I couldn't put them ahead of Paris just because if they would have played these matches a little tighter and maybe won one of them, I would have put them ahead of Paris, because I see Paris as kind of like a middle-of-the-road team with no ability to jump up, and I see London as a team with more potential to jump up. So for now, I'm keeping London at 8 and Paris at 7, just because Paris has been a little more steady, but I will not be shocked by the time my next power rankings come up if London's ahead of Paris, because I think London is just a more talented team with a higher ceiling, but Paris is more consistently making it to semifinals and winning matches each tournament, so I'm going to have to put Paris ahead of them for now. And then number 6, the team that I'm not used to putting anywhere near the middle or top. They made the biggest jump, I believe, in my last one. Let's see, I had them at number 11. Yeah, I had them as the 2nd worst team in the league. Now I have them at 6th. The biggest jump I think we've seen all year is the Subliners. I think this team has immense talent. Like I've said all year, I didn't understand how they were bad, and they finally showed it. I know they didn't make it out of their bracket, but once again, they lost to Atlanta and Chicago, the 2 best teams coming into the tournament. I think New York showed great improvement. I think they're going to be a top 6 team now for the rest of the year, and I'm really, really, really excited to see where this team goes. We're not going to see Doug for the rest of the year now because Mac clearly showed improvement, so unless something crazy happens with this team, Doug will not see the field this year. But I do think that the Subliners made a big improvement. I could even see them jumping past Florida at 5, but for now we've got to give some respect to Florida and keep them at 5. So like I just revealed, Florida's at 5. They won an event. They've been to another final where they lost. They've taken out the Huntsmen the last 2 times they've played them. They look like a really consistent team. They're like a Gen G from last year. Them and Minnesota are like the Gen Gs, kind of. They're consistently. I don't think Florida's ever going to get blown out in a match, but I also don't think they're consistently going to beat the top teams. So I still have to keep them below who I think are the top 4 and put them at 5. And then 4 is the Minnesota Rocker. They're kind of that odd team out. They don't seem like they're like a top team at sometimes, but then other times they seem like they might be the best team in the game, beating FaZe and making it to constant finals, losing both finals they've been into, Florida and Dallas, unfortunately. But they fit in at 4 because I still can't put them out of the Huntsmen, FaZe, or Empire, but they're definitely a tier above teams like Florida and New York, I think, although Florida's kind of gaining on them. And then number 3, the Huntsmen. They've dropped from 2 in my last power rankings. Like I said, I think the roster is kind of in shambles right now. Their vibes are weird. No matter how much they want to say they're not, they just constantly keep losing in semifinals. With that talented roster, you're bound to lose in some semifinals. You can't win every tournament, but losing 3 semifinals in a row with a roster that talented is kind of a concern. So they dropped to 3 for me. And then 2. A new number 2, they've been number 1 all year for me, is FaZe. Like I said, I think if this were still a LAN league, I think Huntsmen and FaZe are ahead of Empire. I think FaZe is the best team in the game, no doubt, and I think probably by the end of the year, FaZe will be the champion of the inaugural league of the CDL. But for now, with the way things have going online, until they catch up, I think they're below Empire, which puts Empire at 1. Given the online nature of the league, like I've said a few times this podcast, Empire are the best because Shotzi and Illy are way better online than they are on LAN, which, I mean, that puts Dallas, especially them all being in the same location, I think helps a lot. That way they all have the same connection and generally probably have better connection than most teams. So I think Dallas has got to be number 1 right now. And then I usually do like 5 major takeaways or so, but we're trying to keep this episode a little more short and sweet. So I'm probably going to do my 3 main takeaways. They're kind of similar to some of them last week, except for I flipped on OGLA. I was wrong on that takeaway and prediction. But the first one is the Huntsmen need a change. I've addressed it, so I don't want to touch on it too much. But the Huntsmen need a change. I think that the roster is insanely talented. There's no need to change it from a talent standpoint. But I think Gunless needs to go, possibly because of vibes, or maybe even Arcides. I know Arcides is a great player, a great vibe bringer, but I think he might not have his full heart in it, wanting to play with Pristini. Nothing against him. I think he's a fantastic player. And obviously I know nothing about this, so my speculation on this could be completely wrong. But I think that he maybe wants to play with Pristini, which I don't think is a bad thing. They're both great players. I just think something needs to change. Or even if they don't have a roster change, because I don't think it's 100% necessary, they need to sit down and work out their issues. They're constantly tweeting after matches that we're not playing the game right, we're not playing the game right. And then a week goes by, the next tournament comes, they lose in the semifinal, and the tweets come out again, we're not playing the game right. Well, if you're 3 tournaments in a row now, you're tweeting after that you're not playing the game right, you've got to sit down, talk to each other, and figure out why you're not playing the game right and what's got to happen. It can't keep happening every single tournament. Another takeaway is that OGLA are 2 in their head, and they're done for the year unless we return to LAN. I touched on this earlier too. I think that OGLA's season is chalked if we continue to play online. The team's talent in this case is almost hurting them in a way, because they know that they're one of the most talented teams and they keep losing, and then they're able to say, oh, we're online, we're going to blame it on that, we're too talented, we wouldn't lose on LAN, even though they were constantly losing on LAN. I think this mentality is going to screw them up for the rest of the year, so unless we return to LAN, OGLA are kind of just done for the year. And the last one, this is kind of almost too early to say this, and some people might think this, but just watching Simp this weekend break Scump's kill record for the CDL, and then a day later break it again. He might be the best talent ever. It's way too early to call him the best player of all time, like accolade-wise, the greatest. I think best and greatest are 2 different things. Best is the most talented, and greatest is talent combined with accolades. Clearly, he's not the greatest yet. He's won 1 playoffs, won 1 champs, and those are his only, well, I guess if you count the 1 event he's won this year, then he has 3 event wins. He's almost won like 50% of the events or more that he's competed in, I believe, if we're counting the online ones. So he might be the best talent we've ever seen. Watching this weekend just further proved that. And a lot of times in sports with people like LeBron or KD, we have people that we love to just hate on. Tom Brady, we love to hate on him. Even me being a Colts fan, I hate on Tom Brady sometimes, but I think we just have to sit back and appreciate Simp at this time. He's only going to be young for so long. I think some people kind of did this with Scump. When Scump was young, coming up in like BO2, BO1, that era, and Ghost, Scump had insane talent, even in AW, that we've never seen before. It was something crazy, it was something different, and obviously Scump has a huge loyal following that was completely backing him, but there were also a lot of people that just loved to hate Scump because he was the most popular and the most talented, and I feel like some of those people kind of missed out because they spent so much time blinded by hate for him that they missed out on watching one of the greatest we've ever seen do it at his peak. Um, and Sims only got so many years to be 18, 19, 20 and be really young and just play free and like this and just absolutely just slay out the map. I think we need to appreciate Simp right now as one of the best we've ever seen do it talent-wise, because who knows, in 2 years he could, I mean, in 2 years he's still going to be an absolutely elite player unless something crazy happens, but his talent level could drop from head and shoulders above everyone else to kind of just the best and barely the best, and then kind of at that level with maybe new subs that come out. So I think we just need to sit down and appreciate Simp. Don't hate on him. I know he doesn't get a ton of hate, but some people really like to act like he's overrated. He's not overrated. He's one of the best we've ever seen. We need to just appreciate it. I think that is gonna do it for this episode. I know I said this one would probably be longer, but it's a little bit shorter just due to the fact that I tried out a new format this time. I think it was better. It was less talking about kind of how matches went and more just talking about takeaways from the teams from the weekend. I know it's like a week and a half from now. This is probably going up on Tuesday after the event. This is probably like a week and a half from now until the next one would come out before the next event. But I kind of thought about possibly looking for some other video ideas to do, maybe like throwback COD rosters from like, maybe take a look at like a bunch of players from Black Ops 3, make like a dream roster, kind of pit a couple rosters against each other, get some conversation going in the comments about who you'd build a dream roster with in certain CODs. So let me know if you guys would like to see something like that. That'd be something I'd love to do because I love to talk about old CODs and look back at my favorite ones like BO3 and BO2 and see what kind of roster I'd want to build, and then see maybe if you guys would agree with my roster or if you would do something different. But that is going to be it for this one. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one talking about our predictions for, I believe it's the Florida event.